Hi everyone, Fresh here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 4 bosses in Grim Batol and breaking down some tips and tricks you can use as a tank in order to make these dungeons easier for both you and your party. So this first boss, General Umbriss, he has one primary mechanic that you'll have to worry about. That's his commanding roar. When he does commanding roar, what will happen is the platform that he's on will get split up into these 4 columns. 3 of the columns will be purple. Those are dangerous. You don't want to stand in those. So you need to move to the safe column as quickly as you can before the dragons fly by and deal damage in those columns. One tip I have as a tank is try and always tank General Umbriss in the middle 2 columns rather than one of the edge columns. By tanking him in the middle columns, whenever you need to move when he does commanding roar, it's easy for you to move to any one of the 4 columns, even if they're one of the far edge columns. In fact, in this kill, I actually don't use Heroic Leap at all. I don't need any sort of movement speed abilities. I'm able to just simply sidestep, from left to right in order to get to the safe column every time. The other mechanic isn't technically a tank mechanic. It's the rock spikes that 3 members of your party will get. It's important for your party to try and line those up as best they can in rows, like this group has here. And what that does is it basically just makes it easier to move, from left to right. You'll kind of have to adjust a little bit vertically with the boss every time they do that, and sometimes you may want to spin around just to kind of, depending on how much space you have as the fight progresses. The third ability he does is Skull Splitter. This is a tank buster, so you do need to be worried about it, especially on higher key levels. As a warrior, shield block is great against this. It stops a lot of the damage, but it will still do a lot of damage on higher tyrannical keys. So I would definitely recommend on those higher keys to save Demoralizing Shout as a defensive cooldown for that every time. And then when the Demoralizing Shout isn't available, you either Last Stand or Shield Wall to fill in those gaps. With General Umbriss dead, we'll be moving straight into the area right before Forgemaster Throngus. Now, Forgemaster is important to think about in terms of his platform and how much space you want in order to fight the boss. So you will definitely need to clear out at least some trash packs in order to kill him. So right now we're starting with his first Molten Giant pack. And currently he is standing on the other side of this walkway, channeling into the forge. So you've got enough time to kill this pack. Now the question is, what do you do after you kill this first Molten Giant pack? Because he will start patrolling, and if you're standing in the middle of the walkway, you will aggro him. That's pretty much always going to be a wipe. You never want to aggro him with any trash. So what you can do is you can actually fight the second Molten Giant pack by standing in that little half circle behind the anvil. So basically right where I'm standing, you can kind of see some other party members are also standing in good spots as well. If your whole party stands here, then when the boss patrols by, you actually won't aggro him at all. In fact, you can see him walking at the top of my screen. He's just walking on his normal patrol pattern. We're not pulling him at all. And so we're just going to go ahead and finish clearing this Molten Giant out. One other tip for warriors, whenever the Molten Giants do Lava Fist, use Spell Reflect. It stops a lot of damage. So after Forgemaster walks up those stairs, we do want to clear this pack here. This opens up a lot of space. So clearing those 3 packs gives you a lot of space in order to kill the boss. And if your DPS is good enough, these 3 packs will be adequate enough in order for you to kill the boss before running out of space and running into additional packs of mobs. I'm playing this key pretty safe, so I go ahead and clear this 4th pack. Killing this 4th pack opens up even a lot more space than what you would have had before. So we're going to clear this, and this is going to give us access to the entire upstairs area where you just came from, and then this whole downstairs area as well. This pack doesn't take too long to kill either, so if you do need the extra space, make use of it as needed. And if you feel like you maybe need all of the space, you can kill that 3rd Molten Giant pack as well using the same trick. Just stand in the half circle on the anvil as the boss is patrolling back and forth, and you can clear that pack. But I decided we're not going to kill that. we're just going to go ahead and use this whole area. This is a pretty large space as it is. If your group is struggling to kill this, then with this much space on like a +7, you're probably going to have some difficulties on Erudax in particular, the last boss. So we're waiting for the Forgemaster to patrol to us. We're going to go ahead and just kind of position him in this corner here. Once he's in position, the whole group is going to stand on my left and the boss's right. And then what this will do is when he does his first frontal, that will bait that away from where we're looking at. And it saves a lot of space because basically, that fire is not eating up a lot of our actual walking space. This fight is pretty simple and straightforward. There's not too much to it. The actual fight itself. Obviously, he has, these 3 different phases: his axe phase, his sword phase, and his mace phase. The important thing for you as a tank in the sword phase is when he does this Molten Flurry, it's good to have a defensive up for it. Again, you can use Demoralizing Shout or Shield Wall to fill in those gaps. And then the most important part as a tank is this Molten Mace ability. When he gets Molten Mace, that buff lasts for 8 seconds. Any melee attack will immediately one-shot you as a tank. I think even with defensives, it will kill you. So essentially, you just have to move away from the boss. He is slowed when he has the mace, so even if you don't have a movement speed ability, you can literally just walk away. Just make sure you do it before the Molten Mace cast finishes. And then we just reposition, and then we just kind of do the fight again. It just repeats, essentially. So again, I think the hardest part of this fight isn't actually the boss fight itself. It's the amount of space you need and how you manage that space. There are like really efficient ways to kind of control this space and manage it and all those sorts of things. But on these sorts of key levels, I think having these 2 platforms opened up gives you plenty of room in order to fight. We do get technically a second mace phase here, I think when he's at like 5%. But he will end up dying. But even if we needed to, and we needed, 1 more phase, we could do it. We've got all this space up here still. And that's Forgemaster Throngus. So with that, we'll be transitioning to the 3rd boss. The 3rd boss is Drahga Shadowburner. And while technically the name of the boss is the Warlock that you start the fight with, the real fight is against the dragon. So here we are pulling the Warlock. The Warlock still does have a decent amount of health. So I actually like to use kind of 30 or 45 second cooldowns on this part of the boss. So like I'll use Avatar, Demoralizing Shout, and Shield Charge. But I went ahead and held Ravager and Champion Spear to line all those up for the dragon. Because the dragon does have a decent amount of health, so you do kind of want to put a lot of damage into it when you can. But you do want to make sure you're still killing Drahga relatively quickly. You don't want to spawn too many of these extra spirits because it just takes more time to kill them. So once the dragon starts to land, I go ahead and tank her kind of in this position right at the entrance. And then I just put my back right up against this column right here. One important thing to keep in mind, particularly in this position, is you want to make sure you don't move the boss past that line. If you look on the right, you can kind of see it. There's that line that, that platform basically, kind of where that right corner is. You want to make sure you don't move there, because if you do that, the boss will move out, you'll reset the fight, and it's really bad to reset this fight. So just make sure you always have your back to the column, and you'll be completely safe. So Valion is a pretty easy fight, but the thing that will make this really easy for you and your party is how you manage the movement as a tank. So I essentially break this up into kind of 4 corners. So when I first pulled her, I was in that one corner, and then I moved her to this corner here. And I'll go ahead and talk about the rotation of abilities right now. So essentially my signal to move her is when she does this frontal. So with my back to the wall, when she does the frontal, she just shoots into the wall. Your group doesn't have to worry about it. So as soon as she does that frontal, I immediately move the dragon, and I'm going to move her to a new corner. So after she does that frontal and I've repositioned her, she's going to put curses out on your group. That's kind of a healer affix. As a warrior, not much I can really do about it. And then after the curses, she will spawn these ads. And then immediately after spawning the ads, she will start casting Twilight Buffet. That's the knockback that she does that you see right there. And then shortly after doing Twilight Buffet, she will do that frontal. And again, as soon as she does the frontal, I reposition the boss, we go to a new corner. The reason to do this is because you'll be able to kind of see it, especially when I'm moving. Every time, those ads die and she's doing the transition, you end up with the Twilight Flames. It's those little pink tornadoes that are spinning around. And that can be really hard to stand in when you're like kind of in the thick of it. So by going from corner to corner, you will always be in a section of the room that shouldn't have any tornadoes in it. In fact, you can kind of see as I'm moving to this corner that we fought her at the very beginning of the pull, this room is completely clear of flame. So now your group can stand there and it makes it very easy to DPS the boss. But that's basically Drahga Shadowburner. So let's go ahead and move on to the last boss, Erudax. There's been a lot of nerfs that Erudax has received that's made this boss quite a bit easier, but there's still some things that can trip groups up, and you want to make sure that you're kind of managing this as best you can. Obviously, the first thing you need to worry about is these tentacles. You want to make sure you never ever walk into a tentacle. If you do, it'll grab you and stun you. Being stunned as a tank is very bad. It can kill you depending on the difficulty. The second thing you'll need to worry about as a tank is the Shadow Gale. So the Shadow Gale, as you can see, is that giant blue and black circle that slowly, compresses in on a location. What I will do is I will kind of watch the edges to kind of gauge where the circle is going. And you don't need to try and get to that position immediately as fast as you can. Basically, just line yourself up and then slowly transition to where the Shadow Gale is going to be. And you can keep moving as you need to. You've got plenty of time to do that with just simple basic movement, no need for fast movement speeds. After Shadow Gale, he will do Crush. That's a tank buster. So you do kind of want to have a defensive for that, demoralizing shout, shield wall, anything like that. The other thing that Crush does is it will push you and throw you back in the air. So always make sure to check your back when he's right before he's about to do Crush to see where you're going to get pushed back into. You don't want to get knocked back into a tentacle. In fact, you'll kind of see that in this next, this next Crush that he does. I'm basically going to position myself behind, put my back to those eggs because I know there's no tentacles back there. So I'm totally safe. I can just charge right back in and go back to DPSing the boss. The nerf on the hatchlings, by the way, is really big here. It makes tanking these a lot easier, a lot safer. The boss is already below 20%, so we're basically just going to have one more Shadow Gale and then the boss will die. There are a lot more tentacles. As the fight goes on, you do get more of them on the ground. So it's important to kind of gauge and plan your route kind of before you start moving for the Shadow Gale. As you can see, I'm kind of transitioning here, but I notice, okay, there are way too many tentacles. So I'm going to use a little warrior trick here. You press Spell Reflect and walk over a tentacle. You'll actually remove the tentacle and not get stunned. So Spell Reflect is a good way to prevent yourself from getting stunned. And that's all the bosses in Grim Batol. I actually think this dungeon is a lot easier since the nerfs. So I would say go ahead and jump in, do these keys. There's obviously really good trinkets in here. People really want those. And if you've been kind of scared of Grim Batol because of the previous weeks, I would definitely say jump in, give these a go, and I think you'll be pretty happy with the results. Thanks everyone for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you want to see more tanking content like this.